The Andromeda Galaxy Council Chamber was a place of immense gravity, literally and figuratively. Constructed on a neutron star's artificial surface, its massive viewing panes showed the swirling, vibrant colors of the galaxy's core. Here, representatives from 1,000 starfaring civilizations gathered, their forms as diverse as the worlds they hailed from. The air, or the carefully maintained atmospheric equivalent, hummed with a tense, self-important energy. At the center of the great circular hall, on a platform of polished obsidian, stood the human delegation. There were 3 of them: Ambassador Alara Vance, her posture rigid, but her face a mask of calm; General Marcus Thorne, a man whose very presence seemed to take up more space than his body should; and Dr. Aris Thorne, the general's younger brother and humanity's foremost xenoanthropologist. They were the sole representatives of a species that had, in the eyes of the galaxy, committed the ultimate transgression. The council was convened by the Zorv, a species of crystalline beings who had appointed themselves the guardians of galactic order. Their lead delegate, a towering, multifaceted entity named Klaxavort, shimmered with an internal light that pulsed in a slow, deliberate rhythm, a sign of profound displeasure. "The verdict has been reached," Klaxavort announced, its voice a resonant hum that vibrated through the very floor. After centuries of observation and careful consideration of the Terran civilization's documented history and trajectory, the Galactic Council, by a unanimous vote, has found humanity wanting. A murmur, a susurrus of whispered clicks, whistles, and telepathic pulses rippled through the assembled delegates. Many looked at the humans with a mixture of pity and revulsion, like a biologist might look at a beautiful but terminally diseased specimen. "We have observed your kind since you first harnessed fire," Klaxavort continued, its facets catching the light as it turned its head, addressing the wider council but focusing its words on the humans. "We have watched you wage war upon yourselves with increasing efficiency. We have seen you poison your own world, slaughter your fellow creatures without thought, and elevate greed and ambition above the harmony of the collective. Your species is a chaotic, violent, and ultimately self-destructive anomaly." Ambassador Vance listened, her expression never wavering. The accusations were not new. They were the same ones humanity had faced for the past decade of these proceedings. She could feel the weight of 1,000 alien stares, each one a judgment. Some were curious, some were fearful, and most were simply condescending. "The Zorv have proposed, and the Council has ratified, a decree of exile," Klaxavort declared. "The humanity is to be confined to its native star system, the Sol system. All hyperlane access will be revoked. All trade agreements are null and void. All embassies are to be closed. You are forbidden from contacting or interacting with any member civilization of this council. You will be quarantined, left to your own devices, to either find a way to coexist peacefully amongst yourselves, or, as our data suggests is more probable, to finally succeed in your species' long-held ambition of self-annihilation." The silence that followed was absolute. The weight of the sentence was crushing. Exile. Not just from the Council, but from the entire galactic community. They were being cast out, like a disease that needed to be contained. Klaxavort's light pulsed brighter, a final, triumphant flicker. "Humanity, do you have anything to say before the decree is made final and your delegation is escorted from this chamber?" General Marcus Thorne took a slow, deliberate step forward. He was a man built for battle, his face scarred and his eyes the color of a winter sky. He didn't look at Klaxavort. Instead, he looked at the gathered thousands. He saw their posturing, their self-righteousness, their utter certainty in their own superiority. He remembered the wars they had fought, not against aliens, but amongst themselves. He remembered the famines, the plagues, the environmental collapses they had barely survived. And he remembered what came after. He remembered the spirit of cooperation that had rebuilt their cities greener and grander than before. He remembered the audacious projects, like the orbital rings and the lunar colonies, born not from a desire for conquest, but from a simple, stubborn refusal to be limited. He remembered the art, the music, the laughter. And he saw in these alien faces the same fear and arrogance he had seen in human tyrants throughout history. They were afraid of humanity's potential, so they were trying to cage it. The silence stretched on, becoming uncomfortable for the delegates. They had expected pleas, outrage, threats, perhaps even a display of that famous human unpredictability. They got none of that from the general. Finally, Ambassador Vance spoke, her voice clear and steady, carrying to every corner of the hall. We understand the council's decision. Another ripple of surprise. Understanding was not the same as acceptance. Your assessment of our history is in many ways accurate, she admitted. The admission was like a physical blow to the assembly. We have been violent. We have been short-sighted. We have been our own worst enemies. General Thorne's gaze finally settled on Calaxvort. But your data is incomplete, he said, at his voice a low rumble that seemed to bypass the ears and resonate in the chest. You've observed us from afar, like watching ants from a mountaintop. You see the trails, the conflicts, the chaos, but you have no idea what it's like to be an ant, to build a mound that can survive the rain, to find a way across a chasm that seems insurmountable. Dr. Eris Thorne, who had been quietly observing the delegates' reactions with a scientist's eye, now spoke up. He pointed a finger at a delegate who resembled a large, placid sea slug. The Quill, for instance. You achieved spaceflight after 1,000,000 years of peaceful evolution. Your society is built on consensus and the avoidance of conflict. He then pointed to a being of pure energy that flickered in a containment field. The Lumina achieved transcendence of the physical form through millennia of shared meditation. He let his hand drop. How humanity achieved spaceflight while fighting 2 world wars simultaneously. We learned to manipulate gravity by studying the collapse of a star, and we sent our first probes to other systems while our planet was still divided by ideologies we now find barbaric. Our progress wasn't a gentle climb. It was a desperate scramble, a survival mechanism honed by a planet that has tried to kill us since the day we stood upright. He looked at Calaxvort. You see our violence. Hey, you don't see our resilience. You see our wars. You don't see the peace we build in their aftermath, a peace far more robust because we understand the cost of its absence. The Zorv delegate pulsed with irritation. Sentiment. Your history is a testament to your instability. The vote is cast. The decree is final. General Thorne nodded slowly. A small, almost imperceptible smile touched his lips. It wasn't a smile of defiance or bitterness. It was a smile of relief, of acceptance, of a weight finally being lifted. He looked at Ambassador Vance. She gave him a single, almost imperceptible nod back. Then it is final, Marcus said, his voice now calm and clear. He turned his back on the Zorv delegate and faced the rest of the council. We would like to thank the council. The hall went utterly silent. Thank? For Exile? For the past 10 years, he continued, we have sat in these chambers, listening to your lectures. We have observed you, just as you have observed us. Why, we have seen the stagnation in your grand ancient civilizations. The Xylos haven't produced a new piece of art in 10,000 years. The Belendi haven't changed their political structure since before humanity learned to smelt iron. You have achieved a kind of perfection, a perfect equilibrium. And you know what? It's boring. He let the word hang in the air, an insult far more potent than any curse. You've created a galaxy-spanning rest home, a museum of yourselves. And you were afraid that humanity, with all our messy, chaotic, unpredictable energy, would break your precious displays. Ambassador Vance stepped forward, her eyes sweeping over the assembly with a newfound intensity. You haven't exiled us, honored delegates. You've set us free. For centuries we have been trying to find our place in your galaxy, she explained. We held back, moderated our expansions, tailored our technological advancements to fit your galactic standards. We wanted to be good neighbors. We wanted to learn from you, but you never saw us as potential peers. You saw us as a problem to be managed. General Thorne gestured towards the viewing pane, towards the swirling heart of the galaxy. You've given us our own walled garden, our own little patch of space. You think you're confining us, but you've just removed the leash. You freed us from the burden of trying to impress you. Dr. Eris Throne chuckled, a warm, human sound that seemed profoundly out of place. Do you know what we've been doing for the past 10 years while you've been deliberating? We weren't just sitting here listening. We were preparing. Not for a war, not for an appeal. For this. For the moment you finally made up your minds. A nervous energy now crackled through the hall. What did he mean, preparing? Ambassador Vance offered a final and gracious nod to the council. We wish you well in your peaceful, orderly, and very predictable future. We will be sure to send you a postcard. With that, the three humans turned and walked away from the podium. They didn't look back. They walked through the silent, stunned assembly, their footsteps the only sound. The guards at the exit, unsure of the protocol, simply stepped aside. They had come as defendants. They left as the freest beings in the galaxy. Back on Earth, the news of the exile was met not with panic or despair, but with a collective sigh of relief that vibrated through the entire solar system. The official announcement was made by the newly formed Terran Sovereign Assembly, which had been secretly preparing for this very outcome for years. The decade of listening, as the populace called the time humanity spent observing the galactic community, had been a period of intense introspection and accelerated planning. Every transmission from the Council, every cultural exchange, every technological peek behind the curtain had been analyzed, deconstructed, and learned from. They saw the weaknesses in the seemingly perfect galactic society, a crippling fear of risk, a reliance on ancient, inefficient technologies because they were proven, and a complete lack of the creative, chaotic drive that defined humanity. Now, the projects that had been kept in the theoretical stage, waiting for this moment of freedom, were greenlit. In the first year after the exile, the changes were already visible from orbit. The orbital rings around Earth, Luna, and Mars, which had been slow, multi-generational construction projects, suddenly saw a tenfold increase in activity. Automated factories powered by zero-point energy drawn from the fabric of space-time itself began churning out components. The rings weren't just for habitation or shipbuilding anymore. They were becoming the foundations for something far grander. Humanity's approach to the solar system changed. The asteroid belt was no longer a mining concern. It became a vast construction yard. Millions of autonomous drones, descendants of the simple robots that had once built cars on Earth, swarmed the rocks, disassembling them and reforming the materials into colossal structures. They built massive gravitational lensing telescopes, not to spy on the galaxy, but to map it with a precision the older races had never dreamed of. And they built the first of the Ares-class interstellar vessels, ships that didn't use the convenient but limited hyperlanes the Council jealously guarded. These ships were equipped with experimental Alcubierre drives, bending space itself to achieve faster-than-light travel without needing a pre-existing cosmic highway. General Marcus Thorne, now the first marshal of the Terran Frontier Fleet, oversaw the construction of humanity's first true warships. They were not designed to fight the Zorv or any other council member. They were designed for exploration and, if necessary, self-defense against unknown threats. They were built with a philosophy of redundancy and robustness that baffled the few xeno-engineers who had ever glimpsed human designs. If one system failed, 3 more would take its place. If a section was breached, it could be sealed off, and the ship would continue to fight. They were ugly, functional, and terrifyingly effective. So Dr. Aris Thorne, no longer just an anthropologist, now headed the Xenological Institute. His teams, however, weren't studying the Council races. They were studying the empty spaces on the star charts, the regions the Council had marked as dangerous or unstable. They were poring over ancient, discarded data, looking for clues about the races that had come before the current galactic order, the ones the Council had conveniently forgotten. And he was convinced that the galaxy held secrets the comfortable, stagnant civilizations were too afraid to uncover. And then there was the cultural shift. Freed from the need to conform, a renaissance erupted. Art, music, and literature exploded in new, daring directions. Holodramas explored themes of exploration and self-determination. Music incorporated the sounds of pulsars and the rhythms of quantum fluctuations. People felt a sense of purpose, a collective energy that hadn't been felt since the Great Rebuilding centuries ago. The Exile wasn't a prison. It was a challenge. The galaxy had told them they were a failed experiment. Humanity's collective response was a resounding, "Just watch." The first major test of humanity's newfound freedom came 5 years after the Exile. A long-range gravitational wave observatory built on a moon of Saturn detected an anomaly. A massive object, unlike anything in the Council's star charts. Ike was drifting into the edge of the Sol system. It wasn't a ship. It was too large, and its trajectory was too erratic. It was a rogue planet, a dark, frozen world cast out from its own star eons ago, tumbling silently through the interstellar void. Under the old regime, this would have been a cause for alarm. Protocol would have demanded they contact the Council, ask for guidance, and perhaps request a survey team. It would have taken years. The rogue planet would have been long gone. Now, but the response was instantaneous. First, Marshal Thorne convened a meeting. "It's a resource deposit the size of a world," he said, his eyes gleaming, "and it's come to our front door." Within a month, a fleet of 100 automated ships and a single, massive manned command vessel, the Resolute, was dispatched to intercept the rogue planet. The mission was simple: capture it. Using a combination of massive gravitational tethers and fusion drives, and they would nudge the planet into a high orbit around the sun, where it could be mined and, potentially, terraformed over the next few centuries. The operation was a resounding success, a testament to human ingenuity and audacity. News of it spread across the galaxy via the slow, conventional means of communication the Council used. The Council races were baffled. A rogue planet was a threat, a thing to be avoided. Humanity had just caught one and started building a new mining colony on it. And the second event was more profound. Dr. Aris Thorne's teams, following a hunch based on fragmented data, detected a faint, repeating energy signature coming from a region of space the Council had marked as a gravitational dead zone, a place to be avoided. They petitioned the Assembly for permission to investigate. The Resolute, now refitted and rechristened the Endeavor, was sent on its first true interstellar mission. The Alcubierre drive worked perfectly. The journey, which would have taken months via hyperlane, took just under 3 weeks. What they found in the dead zone was not a danger. It was a graveyard. The wreckage of a colossal space battle, millions of years old. The ships were unlike anything in the Council's database, built by a species far more advanced than any currently in existence, and amidst the wreckage they found a single, functional data core. It took another 2 years to crack the core's encryption. It's a task that required the combined efforts of every top human scientist and a new generation of quantum computers. When they finally accessed the data, it revealed a history that the current galactic powers had deliberately erased. The ancient race, known as the progenitors, had not died out. They had been destroyed, not by a natural disaster or an internal war, but by a threat from outside the galaxy. The progenitors had detected it, a creeping, spacefaring entity that consumed everything in its path, a plague of living darkness that fed on energy and life itself. The progenitors had fought a desperate galaxy-wide war against this silence, as they called it. They had won, but at a terrible cost. They had driven the silence back, beyond the galactic rim, but they themselves were shattered, their civilization reduced to these drifting ruins. The data core also contained the coordinates of the silence's last known location. And the warning, it is not destroyed. It is only dormant. It will return. Dr. Aris Thorne stood before the Terran Sovereign Assembly, the holographic image of a dying progenitor ship flickering beside him. The silence in the hall was profound. This was not the smug, self-righteous silence of the Galactic Council. This was the silence of a species confronting a terrifying truth. For millions of years, Aris began, his voice quiet, the Council races have sat in their perfect, stagnant little worlds, believing they were the pinnacle of galactic civilization. They were wrong. They are the survivors of a catastrophe they don't even remember. They are children playing in the ruins of a fallen empire, and they have forgotten the monster that killed their parents. He zoomed out on the hologram, showing the vast, empty space between galaxies. The progenitors held the line here. They gave their entire existence to stop this thing, and they succeeded for a time. But they warn that the silence is patient. It adapts. It will find a way back. First Marshal Thorne stood up. His face, etched with the scars of old battles, was grim. The Galactic Council didn't exile us because we were dangerous to them. They exiled us because they were terrified of us. They sensed something in humanity, a fire, a will to survive, that they had lost eons ago. They didn't want that fire near their comfortable little house. They were afraid we might attract the attention of something they'd rather forget. He looked around the room at the assembled leaders, scientists, and military personnel. These were not the polished, self-important delegates of the Council. These were builders, thinkers, explorers, people who had stared into the abyss of their own violent history and chosen to climb out. So the question is no longer about fitting in with the galaxy, Marcus declared. The question is about survival, not just our own. If the silence returns, it won't stop with us. It will consume everything. The Council, for all their posturing, is defenseless. They've forgotten how to fight. They've forgotten how to innovate under pressure. They've spent 1,000,000 years trying to build a perfect cage, and now they're the ones inside it. Ambassador Alara Vance, now the head of the Terran Assembly, rose. Her expression was one of resolve. We have a choice. We can hide, like the Council wants us to. We can stay in our solar system, enjoy our newfound freedom, and hope the progenitors were wrong. Or, she let the word hang. Or we can do what humanity has always done, Aris finished for her. We can look at an impossible problem, laugh in its face, and get to work. A new energy filled the room. It wasn't fear. It was the same energy that had driven their ancestors to sail across uncharted oceans, to fly through the air, to walk on the moon. It was the audacity to hope, to strive, to fight against odds that would crush any other species. The exile was a gift. It had given them focus. It had given them freedom. And now, it had given them a purpose far greater than they could have ever imagined. The galaxy had cast them out, but humanity was no longer looking inward. They were looking out, at the darkness between the stars, and they were preparing. They were building not just for themselves, but for the day when the silence would return. And on that day, the quiet, See, quarantined little planet Earth would not be a victim. It would be a fortress. It would be a beacon. It would be the spark that reignites the galaxy. The Council, in their infinite, fearful wisdom, thought they had locked the door on a problem. They had only succeeded in giving that problem a place to grow strong, unobserved, and unhindered. Humanity smiled and moved on, not from the shame of exile, but towards the greatest challenge the universe had ever thrown at them. And for the first time in their long, tumultuous history, they were truly ready.